In this lesson, I'm going to again demonstrate how to get a nice shiny surface, this time on a red apple. I'm going to be using two techniques on this one. The first is using scotch tape to lift out these little white highlight areas here, the spots on the apple's surface. And then I'm going to be using an OMS wash again, but a different solvent this time, just to demonstrate its properties as opposed to the previous one we used. First of all, I'm going to lay in just a very pale wash of peach all over. Again, I'm just going to be working on top left hand area for you, but like I said before, I would just carry on working in exactly the same way if I was doing the full apple. Because we're going to be using a wash, I'm not being very careful with my hatching here. I'm just going any old way. You can see the tooth of the paper coming through, the texture of it. But it won't matter because the mineral wash later on will bring that all together and get rid of that effect. I'm going to use some greens to get this lovely bit by the core, spring green this one. By the stalk. A bit of yellow ochre, I think, just to get the colour right. And put this dark area in as well, give me just a reference point for all the tonal values then. This is just dark brown. A bit of purple. Dark green. A bit of yellow ochre just to get the colour right. Right, that'll do for now. I think I'll come in a bit later and finish it, but that's enough. Right, I'm going to bring in some red now. This is poppy red. Building up in just light layers, but again not being too worried about how I'm applying it. In terms of stroke, I'm just being quite scribbly. Go back to peach and put some more in this darker band under that highlight. And for now I'm leaving this highlight area completely free of colour. I'm going to switch to some purple in this darkest bit. Just using it as well to bring the same colour into some of these areas that are shading areas, just to get the shape coming through, but I'm using the same colours just to give it a unified feel. I'm going to go to a different red now. I'm going to use crimson red. I'm just going to darken off this peach a little bit and try and get, without making a harsh line, just get the shape of that underneath with the highlight. And this peach is going to be the base colour that we're picking out to when we use the Scotch tape. A bit more poppy red. So I'm using this red in an all over layer on top of the peach. I'm not even trying to pick out any of those details, and hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate easier the effect of the Scotch tape by doing that. If I was actually working on it, probably the bigger areas that are left I might, sort of go around a little bit, but for the purpose of this example I'll just colour over the whole lot. just come and make this area a bit brighter. More green in it. And then I think I'm ready to use the solvent. Oh no, I think I'm ready to use the tape to show you how to pick out those areas. So, just got a piece of quite low tack scotch tape, sometimes sold as book bending tape. I'm just going to lay it over the area where I want to bring out some highlights, and then I'm going to use an embossing tool, but you could use a biro, anything that can press on. You could even use something with a bit of a sharper point, a sharp pencil even. Depends how much of a line you want and how much of a sort of general area. So on this I'm just going to pull out general areas like that, quite gently, colour over, press on where I want to lift the colour out. Just by laying it down without even pressing on it, you'll remove some of the colour. I think you'll see that in a minute. But so I'm just sort of going in these areas where I want to remove it. And you can see when you press on the tape that it's starting to stick the colour to the tape. And then when you pull it off, it's lifted it out. You can use the same thing. You can use the same piece for quite a while before it gets... See, when there's a lot of pencil already built up, it looks quite high contrast when you take a bit out. I'll just show you what happens if you just use the tape by itself and just push a little bit. And you see it just lightens your colour, so it's quite a useful technique if you do make errors. Like just up here I've noticed I've accidentally coloured over some of this white highlight, so I can just go pull it back out. Because we're using two techniques today, so we're using this and then I'm going to use a mineral spirit wash, I'll just point out that if you've used a wash, you can't really use this technique as effectively. It will work to an extent, but the spirit when it's dissolved, the pigment seems not to allow it to come off as easily, stick to the tape as easily. So I'd say definitely to use this technique before you put the spirit on. Just do one or two in here. Yep, happy with that. So now, just going around those areas I've lifted out. Going over some of them to see, like I said, it's brought them out quite high contrast, but now we can just fill them in. Bit of purple to define these dark bits a little bit. It's ready for using the spirit now. I'm just using baby oil, just from the supermarket. Pick this one up. I'm just working in with a tiny drop of it on a cotton bud and then dab off the excess. And I'm going to just use very gentle dabbing strokes. Just to blend the colours. And I'm going to just use it now to soften the edges of that highlight, pulling some of the colour. And you see, if I brush my cotton bud over it, it can extend the colour down. It's turning it as though it's turning it into paint. So that's the technique I'm using, just to pull this colour into the edges of the highlight and blend it. And it just takes away the texture. I can't see the texture of the paper on the areas I've gone over now. So it didn't matter that we were using a scribbly hatching technique, so it all blends together. And then where I've got some pigment on the cotton bud, I'm going to just use it to show you that you can paint with it. Add colours where you add a bit of colour when you might need it. You could apply it with, I'm just thinking now, when it's getting towards the edges, it's not actually very accurate using a cotton bud, and I'm a bit worried about losing the edge of my apple, but you could apply it with a fine paintbrush either, in areas where you needed a bit more control. And for very large areas, if you're doing a big picture, say a dark background that you wanted to be very uniform, you could just use a piece of cotton wool or tissue paper, and that would work, just to apply it with that on a larger scale. Okay, I'm just going to let that dry now. So the wash is dry now. I'm just going to demonstrate what I was trying to tell you before about using the magic tape. So all that area's had a wash of the OMS on. I'm just going to colour over it. It looks as though it's going to lift out colour, but it only takes it away a tiny bit. I'll show you in a dark area just to demonstrate. It's really not taking it out the same way it was before. You know, there's none of that high contrast dot appearing. It will lift it to a tiny degree, but really when you've applied the wash, that technique is not as useful anymore. Straight away I can see now where I need to adjust the tone of everything. So I'm going to darken off this area. And that the baby oil works in exactly the same way as the Zestic, in that it's made the surface of the paper now feel quite smooth under my pencil. So the application of the colours on top of it are a lot smoother. You're not seeing the grain of the paper through anymore. It's created as like a sealed layer that we can work on top of. Just going to see if I can pull any of this. I've noticed that I've got rid of this highlight by accident. See if I can pull any of it away. It's lightening it a little bit. Just realised I didn't really use the wash on this area up here, so I'm going to need to go back in with one in a little minute. I'm not happy with how dark I've made that little area there, so I'm going to use that scotch tape and lift it out. It's quite useful. You do just have to watch how much pressure you use through your tool, because especially on something like watercolour paper, which is quite soft, it's easy to emboss, and then when you put in colour over the top you might end up with little white marks of the shape of where you've pressed. So I'm just using, it's only quite a light pressure I'm using to pull that out. You can just use your finger either. Going back to using peach, I'm just going to tighten up this edge. I'm just going to put a tiny bit of the red into this area, and then I'm going to use another OMS wash just to blend that. Just take the stark whiteness out of it. I'm going to put a bit of brown on this edge. I don't want to use too much brown or grey tones, because it can, if you're using it on things that are food, it can start to sort of make it look a bit mouldy. Just a tiny bit, just to change it tonally. I'd say usually I would use darker versions of the main colours to do my shading, rather than bringing in browns and greys. Just going to use another little wash. You can see that, because there's a lot more pigment actually built up in layers on the picture. It really is turning it like quite thick paint. I need to be able to pull down. Work on that area we missed before. And you do have to be careful. If you don't want to use the pigment that's appeared on your cotton bud, you must keep changing to clean ones, otherwise you will put colour where you don't want it. I think I'm pretty happy with that. I hope it's showed that those two techniques working together can help to build up a nice shiny surface of the apple.